Hello everyone and welcome to my video lecture series. Our topic for today is going to be applications of biotechnology. Okay, in our last lecture we had completed with recombinant DNA technology. So before starting with this part, if you are watching this lecture and if you have yet not subscribed to my channel, or if you are a new viewer, then kindly subscribe to my channel and also press the bell icon so that you get updates whenever I upload. Anyway, coming back to today's part, it is going to be about applications of biotechnology. Now there are basically four applications in biotechnology. I'm going to list them over here. The first is the application in healthcare, which is also called as healthcare biotechnology. Okay, the second application is in agriculture. The third application is in a technique which is called as gene therapy. And the fourth application is in GMOs. Now GMOs are also called as genetically modified organisms. Anyway, in today's lecture we are just going to cover these first two applications, that is applications in healthcare biotechnology and applications in agriculture, and the remaining applications we are going to cover in the subsequent lecture. Okay, so let us start with the first application, that is application in healthcare. So I will write down the topic. Okay, the first topic is healthcare biotechnology. Now first of all, what do you understand by the term healthcare? So healthcare is medicine related or fields which are related to medicine technology. Okay, so under healthcare, basically how does biotechnology help? That is the topic that we are going to study right now. Okay, how does biotechnology help the medical field? So basically biotechnology is useful in many fields related to the healthcare. I will write down some of the names. For example, biotechnology can be useful in organ transplant. So organ transplant is basically where a proper working organ is transplanted into a person who is having a defective organ. Obviously the defective organ is removed, for example kidney transplant. So biotechnology plays a very important role in producing or harvesting or cultivating organs, okay, by using the method of tissue culture and also by using recombinant DNA technology. So in organ transplant, biotechnology plays a very important role. Then it plays an important role in forensic medicine. Okay, then the other fields where biotechnology can be used is something which is called as gene probing. Gene probing is where the gene are used as probes, okay, or they are used as markers in the medical field. Okay, then it can be also used in DNA fingerprinting. So everybody knows what DNA fingerprinting is. Okay, so these are some of the examples of fields which are present in healthcare which make use of biotechnology. Okay, and because of biotechnology their products have become much more better. So that is how healthcare or the medical field or the therapeutic field benefits from biotechnology. Now under healthcare biotechnology we have to study a few parts. Okay, so first of all we have to study about how insulin, that is a hormone, how it is produced using biotechnology. Then we have to study the part about vaccines. Okay, so over here I will write down another application, that is production of hormones like insulin. And the next application will be production of vaccines. So basically we have to know about how insulin and vaccines are developed using this biotechnology. So that is called as healthcare biotechnology. Okay, so let us start with the first part under healthcare biotechnology, and that is regarding insulin. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scroll down. Okay, so let us start with the first topic, which is insulin. Now, first of all, what is insulin? Now, insulin is a hormone which is responsible for glucose absorption from the bloodstream. Okay, so whenever you have your meals, the blood glucose level increases, correct? And what happens is, at that time, insulin is secreted. Insulin is a hormone, okay, and insulin is secreted by the beta cells. If you want, I will write it down over here. It is secreted by the beta cells, which are present in an area called as islets of Langerhans, and this area is present in the pancreas. Okay, so the beta cells present in the islet of Langerhans of pancreas produces this hormone insulin. What is the function? So whenever the blood glucose level increases, insulin is released, and insulin allows the cells of the body to absorb that glucose. So that increasing amount of glucose in the blood, that begins to go inside the cells. So the blood glucose level decreases because the glucose is being absorbed by the cells, whereas the cells take in glucose for their energy requirement or for their nourishment. So that is how it works. So till insulin is released, the blood glucose cannot be absorbed by the cells, and the blood glucose keeps on going high, keeps on increasing. As soon as insulin is released, the cells can absorb glucose, and the blood glucose level will slowly decrease, and the cells can take glucose. Is that clear? So insulin plays a very important role in absorption of sugar by the cells. Now what happens is, in certain people, insulin is not produced at all, or it is produced in very low quantities, and these people suffer from a disorder which is called as diabetes mellitus. Okay, so diabetes mellitus is a disorder in which these people do not produce insulin, or produce very small quantities of insulin. So what happens is, the sugar is not absorbed efficiently into the cells, and the blood sugar level keeps on increasing, and because of that, a lot of glucose or the lot of sugar is excreted in the urine also. So that is called as diabetes mellitus. Is this clear? Now what happens in people suffering from diabetes mellitus? These people need to be administered insulin injections because their body cannot produce insulin, so they have to be given insulin injections. Okay, so patients have to be given insulin injections. All right, and depending on how severe the situation is, the amount of insulin that will be injected will be more or less. Is this clear? Now the question arises, where does all that insulin come from, the insulin which has been injected? Because in a normal healthy person, the insulin is produced by the beta cells of islets of Langerhans in the pancreas. But if you are using insulin and injecting it into a person suffering from diabetes mellitus, where is that extra insulin coming from? So in the olden times, what used to happen is that insulin was basically extracted from cattle, and it was also extracted from horses. So these animals were specially killed, and from their pancreas, the insulin, obviously it was tested whether the insulin was compatible with human insulin or not, and that insulin was extracted from these animals, and it was stored, and whenever it was required, the people who were suffering from diabetes mellitus, they were given these injections. So this was not a proper method of insulin storage, because you had to kill animals. Plus there were many complications which were occurring because the insulin was coming from a different species. So by using biotechnology, we can actually create insulin. Okay, by using recombinant DNA technology, we can actually create insulin, and when we can create that insulin, we can extract it and store it, and whenever a person requires it, we can use it and give it to them. Now how do you create insulin using recombinant DNA technology or using biotechnology? So there was a person who was called as, I will write down his name over here, Hakura. Okay, and his co-workers. So I will write down Hakura et al. I have already told you in one of the previous lectures that whenever I want to write down the name of the people, co-workers who are supporting the main worker, we write down et al. So Hakura and his co-workers. So what Hakura did was, He basically, first of all, he studied the structure of insulin which is present in the human beings. Now insulin is basically a peptide hormone, okay, it is a hormone, and this insulin, if you see the structure of insulin, it is a protein, okay. So insulin is produced in our body through protein synthesis. There will be transcription, there will be translation. So there has to be a gene in our body which is transcribed and translated and which gives rise to the peptide hormone or the protein insulin. Is this clear? Now this insulin is basically made up of a structure having two chains. Please remember, I am writing it down over here. Insulin is made up of two chains, A chain and B chain, okay. Now these are both polypeptide chains. Everybody knows that proteins are composed of smaller units which are called as polypeptides. So there are two polypeptide chains. Obviously each polypeptide chain will be made up of amino acids. Everybody knows many amino acids form a polypeptide, many polypeptides form a protein. So these two polypeptide chains A and B together, they form the human insulin. So what Hakura and his co-workers did was, they first of all found out the structure of insulin, then they found out the gene which was responsible for the formation of insulin. Insulin is a protein, so it is produced by protein synthesis, so there has to be an original gene which will give rise to the protein, right? So they found out the structure of that gene, they found out the sequence of gene of insulin. So for example, obviously insulin is a very big molecule. Suppose if I say that the gene sequence, the sequence of nucleotides in gene for insulin is say AATGCAT. This is a very small structure, right? I'm just writing it down as an example. So this is suppose 5 prime to 3 prime, this will be 3 prime to 5 prime, so this will be TACGTA. Suppose this is the gene which gives rise to insulin. So Hakura and his co-workers found out this nucleotide sequence of the gene which was responsible for formation of insulin, okay, and then using recombinant DNA technology, they transferred this gene into a vector, and that vector was then inserted into a competent host, and that competent host, by using protein synthesis, it basically made the same insulin from the gene which was inserted. Is this clear? Okay, now first of all I am going to show you the structure of insulin. It is not given in the book, okay. So the structure of insulin is something like this. This is your insulin structure. As you can see, there are two chains over here, okay. This is chain A, okay, this one, and this is chain B. As you can see, this entire chain is made up of these small units. These are all amino acids: glycine, valine, okay, cysteine. All these are amino acids, and these polypeptide chains, okay. So this is first polypeptide chain. So I will write down first polypeptide, okay, and this is the second polypeptide chain. They are renamed as A and B, and both these chains, if you say, they are joined by disulfide bonds, okay. These bonds which you see, this bond is called as a disulfide bond because two sulfur atoms are present. So this is your structure of insulin. You don't need to remember. Now obviously you know that each amino acid is represented by a single codon. So this entire structure of codons and the gene which was responsible for formation of those codons, that entire structure was discovered by Hakura and his co-workers, okay. So Hakura was responsible for recognizing the sequence of nucleotides present on the gene which was responsible for formation of the protein which is called as insulin. Please remember this gene, which is basically a part of DNA, it undergoes transcription, okay, and after transcription it forms the different types of RNAs. mRNA is one of them, and then after translation you get a product which is called as protein, and in this case the protein was insulin. So Hakura and his co-workers found out the sequence of nucleotides of the gene which was responsible for formation of insulin. Is this clear? So that is a very important contribution. Now the recombinant DNA technology method, Okay, coming back to what we were studying, the recombinant DNA technology method, which was basically done, that recombinant DNA technology method was shown by a person called as Gilbert and his co-worker. So I will write it down over here. Okay, recombinant DNA technology method used, that was shown by whom? That was shown by Gilbert and his co-worker. All right, so there were basically two important scientists. One was Hakura and his co-workers. They were responsible for finding out the nucleotide sequence of the gene which was responsible for formation of insulin, and the other person was Gilbert and his co-worker, who used this gene in recombinant DNA technology. Now, how they produced insulin, let us have a look at that. Very simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rub this off, okay, and I'm going to write the steps. So what is the first step? The first step is obviously, so recombinant, I'm writing down the heading, recombinant DNA technology method to produce insulin. This is the method which we are going to see now. So what are the steps? The first step, already the gene we have obtained. Hakura has already obtained the gene which produces insulin, right? If you need more quantities of the gene, you will use PCR and you will amplify it. Okay, so you already have the gene. Now the next thing what Gilbert did was he took that gene and he inserted it into a cloning vector. So this is the first step, everybody knows. So the first step is going to be gene plus cloning vector. Now which was the cloning vector which was used? The cloning vector which was used was PBR322, one of the most commonly used plasmids. Okay, I have already talked about PBR322 in one of the previous lectures. So this gene was obviously inserted into the cloning vector PBR322. Restriction enzymes were used to cut the restriction sites, and when both these two were joined, what did you get? You got a structure which is called as the recombinant DNA. Everybody knows this. Okay, I hope you remember the gene which we use, that is also called as the foreign DNA, or it is called as passenger DNA, and cloning vector is called as the vehicle DNA, or it is also called as the vector DNA. So please remember this. So we get the recombinant DNA. Okay, now I'm just going to draw it over here. Suppose if the recombinant DNA is something like this. Suppose if this is the PBR322 plasmid, okay, and this is the area which I have removed. This is the PBR322 plasmid, and you can see this area has been cut using a restriction enzyme, and in this area we have inserted the gene which is going to help in production of insulin. So over here the gene was inserted. Okay, and this recombinant DNA molecule was obtained. Now where was this gene inserted? So this required gene, or this foreign gene, or the gene which produces insulin, this was inserted into the plasmid, and it was placed in such a way that it was placed next to the gene. So this area which I am marking in yellow, this is basically the gene which is coding for an enzyme called as beta galactosidase. For those who don't know what is beta galactosidase, when we learn the lac operon has three structural genes: LAC-Z, LAC-Y, LAC-A. What is the function of lac operon? To convert lactose into glucose and galactose. Glucose is used by the cell, right? And this is present in E. coli. Now LAC-Z, which is a structural gene present in the lac operon, when it undergoes transcription and translation, it produces an enzyme or a protein called beta galactosidase, and beta galactosidase breaks the lactose into glucose and galactose. Now in this PBR322, so everybody knows the properties of cloning vectors. You have to have an origin of replication, you have to have antibiotic resistant markers, you have to have promoter operator, you have to have this structural gene. So there is also a structural gene for beta galactosidase present, which I have shown over here. Just beside that gene we put the gene for insulin. So this was done by whom? This was done by Hakura and Gilbert and all the other co-workers. So I hope this is clear. Which was the vector that was used? The vector which was used was called as PBR322. Is this clear? So this is the information that you need to know. So this was your recombinant DNA. Now, where was this recombinant DNA added? This recombinant DNA was added into a competent host. So the most common example of a recombinant of a competent host, as you all know, it was inserted into the host which was called as Escherichia coli. So this plasmid, this recombinant DNA, that was then inserted into E. coli, okay, E. coli bacteria, and what happened was, then you know the steps. The plasmid begins to replicate, the E. coli are also multiplied, the transformed colonies are taken, they are multiplied. So what will happen is more and more E. coli will be produced. Inside each coli there will be that gene which has been inserted. Now what will happen? That gene, it will undergo transcription and translation inside the E. coli, and what will happen is that protein, that insulin will be produced inside E. coli. So now by using recombinant DNA technology, you have produced insulin in E. coli instead of human beings. And as many bacteria that you have, similarly the quantity of insulin will keep on increasing, and you don't have to kill any animals to get insulin. I hope this is clear. So next step I am going to write down, inside the host E. coli, when you insert that recombinant DNA, what is the next step that you get? The next step that you get is E. coli gets transformed. You know what is the meaning of transform? Transform means it accepts the recombinant DNA, and the next step is it is going to produce the insulin. Now, when the E. coli gets transformed and it starts using the gene for transcription and translation, it doesn't directly produce insulin. It basically produces an insulin which is called as pre-pro-insulin, and it also produces another product which is called as penicillinase. Okay, these are the two products which are formed when the recombinant DNA is inserted into the E. coli bacterial cell. So the E. coli bacterial cell will produce the insulin protein from that gene by using protein synthesis, and a byproduct will be penicillinase. Now, first of all, what is pre-proinsulin? So pre-proinsulin is basically an inactive form of insulin. Please remember this. Okay, this pre-proinsulin which is present, it is an inactive form of insulin. That means it will have to be activated first, and then only it can do its function. So when this pre-proinsulin, it is given to human beings inside the body of the humans, it gets activated and it converts into activated insulin form. What is penicillinase? So penicillin, I think everybody knows that penicillin is a kind of an antibiotic. Okay, it is a broad spectrum antibiotic, that is, it can be used to kill many bacteria, but in this transformed E. coli, this penicillinase is formed. Penicillinase is an enzyme which basically destroys penicillin. So all the bacteria which have got penicillinase, they cannot be killed by the antibiotic penicillin, because this enzyme will destroy the structure of penicillin. Is this clear? So these two compounds are formed in the E. coli after the recombinant DNA molecule has been inserted into E. coli. Is this clear? Pre-proinsulin, now what you will have to do is you will have to remove it. If you remember the last step of recombinant DNA technology, that is obtaining the product, that is by downstream process. So this pre-proinsulin, that will be obtained using a downstream process. What is the meaning of downstream process? Downstream process is a process in which you purify or you separate the products from the cells or microorganisms which have made them. I have already told you about this in my last lecture. Okay, and then during this downstream process, an amino acid is used, and that is called as trypsin. So it is also called as trypsin treatment. So if you want to remove that inactivated pre-proenzyme, pre-proinsulin from E. coli cells, then you need to do something which is called as trypsin treatment, which helps in the removal of that pre-proinsulin from the E. coli. Once that pre-proinsulin is removed, it can be stored. Every cell will give you pre-proinsulin depending on number of bacteria. Bacteria will keep on multiplying. You will have a large source of insulin. This insulin is stored. Whenever it is required by any patient suffering from diabetes mellitus, it can be injected. Is this clear? So this is the way how recombinant DNA technology or biotechnology can be used in making insulin. Which are the important names? Okay, the first important name is Gilbert, okay, and the other important name is Hakura. So Hakura and Gilbert, they were responsible for developing this technique. Please remember this. So I hope this is clear. Okay, the important points to remember over here are going to be, first of all, the plasmid which was used, the vector was PBR322. Inside it, the gene which produces insulin was inserted. Hakura determined the sequence of nucleotides in the gene, and Gilbert did all the recombination technology process. Okay, once that gene was inserted into PBR322, where was it inserted? It was inserted just besides the gene coding for beta galactosidase, and then this was inserted into E. coli. Inside E. coli, because of protein synthesis, insulin was formed, but it was inactive, which was called pre-proinsulin. This pre-proinsulin can be removed by using trypsin treatment. Once it is removed, it can be stored and given to patients whenever required. Another product of this is penicillinase, which is an enzyme which destroys penicillin. So all these bacteria who are basically transformed, they are having resistance to penicillin. They cannot be killed by penicillin. Is this clear? So that is about insulin manufacture. So I hope this part is clear. So this is the first part under healthcare biotechnology, that is how is insulin produced. So I hope this entire part is clear. Now the next thing that we have to learn under healthcare biotechnology is production of vaccines. Please remember this. Okay, so we are going to study about vaccines. All right, so the next part is going to be vaccine production. All this is under healthcare biotechnology. Please remember, we are still studying the first application of biotechnology, that is healthcare biotechnology. We have already studied production of insulin. Now let us study vaccine production. Now first of all, what are vaccines? A very important question. So I will write down what is the definition for vaccines. Okay, so a vaccine is a biological product which is responsible for active acquired immunity in human beings. Okay, now take a look at this definition. Okay, I don't know how many of you know what vaccines actually are. For example, a polio vaccine is taken so that polio cannot occur. Okay, there are many such vaccines for different diseases. So it is a biological product which is responsible for, now I'm going to underline this, active acquired immunity. Okay, now what is the meaning of active acquired immunity? Now active immunity is a type of immunity. There is something called as passive immunity. Similarly, there is something called acquired immunity, something called as innate immunity. Now these four words we are going to learn in detail in the chapter Human Health and Diseases, but for now I will tell you what is the meaning of active immunity. So I will just write it down over here. So active immunity is basically when your body produces its own antibodies. Okay, so what are antibodies? Antibodies are the chemical proteins or the chemicals which are produced by the body when a foreign microorganism enters your body. For example, a foreign bacterium or virus enters your body. These foreign microorganisms have structures called as antigens present on them. Okay, and these antigens can cause disease in your body. So to combat that, your body produces chemicals which are called as antibodies. These antibodies go and bind to the antigen on the foreign microorganism, and they prevent the microorganism in causing any damage. Is this clear? So when your body produces its own antibodies, it is called as active immunity. Whereas in passive immunity, I am just telling you this so that you don't get confused. Whereas passive immunity is an immunity where the body doesn't produce its own antibodies, the antibodies are injected from outside. For example, just imagine a person who is already suffering from a disease, okay, and the body doesn't have time to produce antibodies. See, normally a body takes quite some time to produce antibodies, okay, it is not very instant. So suppose if a person is already having a severe form of the disease, then there is no time for the body to produce new antibodies. So in such a case, ready-made antibodies are injected into that person. Such an immunity is called as passive. Is this clear? I hope these two words are clear. Active means that the body produces its own antibodies. Passive means the antibodies are readily or ready-made antibodies are injected into the person. Now coming to the third and fourth word, there is something called as acquired immunity, and there is something which is called as innate immunity. First of all, I will tell you what is innate. Innate means something which is present right from birth. So the immunity which is present in a newborn child, that is called as innate immunity. Okay, this innate immunity is not very strong. However, this immunity can protect the child from very basic infections. That is called innate immunity. It is present from birth. Acquired immunity is the immunity which is developed as the child grows. For example, first time the chickenpox virus, when it enters the body of a child, that child doesn't have any antibodies against chickenpox because it is the first time the virus has entered. So that virus will cause the disease, and slowly the body will produce antibodies and it will destroy the virus and it will get cured. Now next time when the chickenpox virus enters that same body, the antibodies for chickenpox are already present, and they will not let the virus to cause the disease, and they will combat the virus because they are already present. So this is an example of acquired immunity because it was not present from the beginning, it was acquired, it was obtained over a period of time. So vaccines are called as active acquired immunity because here you are basically introducing substances inside your body because of which your body is producing its own antibodies. So that is why active. And acquired because this was not present from the beginning inside your body. So I hope these four words are clear. Anyway, we will be learning about these words in the chapter Human Health and Diseases. So I am rubbing this off. So I hope this is clear. So vaccine is a biological product which is responsible for active acquired immunity in humans. Now, what exactly are vaccines? So there are different kinds of vaccines, right? Some of them are oral vaccines, most of them are given by injections. What are vaccines made up of? So a vaccine, if you see, a vaccine is basically a weakened organism. I will write it down over here. It is a weakened pathogen. I will write. Pathogen is a very good word. Pathogen means a microorganism, okay, which is causing the disease. It may be a virus, it may be a bacterium, it may be a protozoan. Any organism which causes a disease is called as a pathogen. So suppose if we take the polio vaccine, okay, what is the meaning, what is the polio vaccine made up of? So basically the polio virus which is there, which causes the disease polio, right? That polio virus, it is basically made weak, okay, and because of that you can actually insert it into the body. So when it enters the body, that weak polio vaccine virus, it cannot cause the disease, because the harmful proteins which cause the disease, they have been removed or they have been modified so that they cannot cause the disease. However, the virus is alive, so it will try to spread the disease, it will release the proteins, but it cannot cause the disease because it has become weak. We have made it weak. Now what happens is, these antigens or proteins which cause the disease, they are now observed by the body, and the body prepares antibodies against it. It will take some time, it may take weeks or months, and once the antibodies are ready, if someday an actual polio virus enters your body, then those antibodies will go and attack the virus and prevent the virus from causing the disease. So this is how a vaccine works. A vaccine is basically that same pathogen which causes the disease, but it has been made weak, or it has become weakened. So either you insert the entire weak organism, weak virus or weak bacteria, or you just insert its antigen. If you want, I will just draw a diagram over here. I am going to draw the diagram of a virus. Just imagine this is the virus. Now this virus is basically going to have proteins on the surface, these green colored proteins which I am showing. These proteins are called as antigens. I will write it down. Okay. This orange colored covering is called as the capsid or the protein coat, and inside will be present the genetic material. It can be DNA, RNA, whatever. Okay, now what happens is, when this virus enters your body, these antigen proteins, green colored proteins, they are toxic and they cause the disease. And what happens is, over the time your body produces substances which are called as antibodies. So I will show you this. Suppose if these blue colored structures are antibodies which are produced, then these antibodies will go and bind to the antigen. Are you getting this point? So I am showing over here, they will go and bind to the antigen, and because of that they will prevent the antigen or the proteins from causing any damage. So that is how your body works. Okay, so when you want to create a vaccine, what we do is, this same virus we take, but we remove the harmful parts of that protein or the antigen, and then we can either take it orally, we can swallow it, or we can take it via injection, and these viruses, when they enter our body will produce antibodies and they will be ready for it. Is this clear? So this is what a vaccine is. So I hope this idea about a vaccine is clear. So I hope this part is clear. Now, how are vaccines important? Vaccines are very, very important because they can basically eradicate disease. What is the meaning of eradication? Eradication means the disease has been completely wiped off. For example, a disease called as yellow fever has been completely wiped off from the planet Earth. At one time, many deaths were caused because of this yellow fever. Okay, but because of a vaccine, it is completely wiped off. Also, polio has mostly been wiped off from most of the parts of the earth. That is also because of a vaccine. So vaccines are very, very important in curbing the disease and at the same time eradicating them so that they are no longer present anywhere in the world. Is this clear? Okay, so that is called as a vaccine. Also, now we come to the part that how is biotechnology helpful in vaccine production. So you have heard about recombinant DNA technology. So the vaccines which are produced through recombinant DNA technology, they are called as recombinant DNA vaccines. Please remember this. Recombinant DNA vaccines are the vaccines which are produced by using biotechnology, by using recombinant DNA technology. There are many examples of recombinant DNA vaccines. Okay, I will write down a few of them over here. Okay, there is one kind of a vaccine which is called as naked DNA vaccine, and the other one is called as a viral vector vaccine. Another one is called as plant based vaccine. So all these vaccines are example of vaccines which are produced using recombinant DNA technology. Now, how are these vaccines produced? It is very, very simple. Okay, you take the protein from the virus or the microorganism, the protein which is causing the disease, that you isolate. Again, that protein is formed from a gene by protein synthesis by that organism. So you find out the structure of that gene, you find out the sequence. That gene you take and you insert it into a vector. That vector you take and you insert it into a host. The host will produce that same protein which the microorganism is producing, and that protein you can use to make a vaccine. It is as simple as that. Now these examples that I have written, what are the meaning of these vaccines? Now this has not been explained in the book. Naked DNA vaccine is a vaccine in which a vector is not used. Instead of that, a double-stranded DNA is used. Okay, so in naked DNA vaccine, the double-stranded DNA basically behaves like a vector. I will write it down over here. Double-stranded DNA acts like a vector. So you are not using other vectors like artificial chromosome, plasmids, phagemids, cosmids, bacteriophages. No, you are just using a double-stranded DNA, and in that double-stranded DNA, so that double-stranded DNA will be something like this. Okay, it will be something like this. This is your double-stranded DNA. Okay, and inside this double-stranded DNA, you are going to insert the gene which is responsible for production of the protein which causes the disease. So instead of a vector, you are using double-stranded DNA. That is why it is called naked DNA vaccine. Is this clear? Viral vector vaccine is a vaccine in which you are using virus as the vector instead of using a bacterium as a vector. So that is called as viral vector vaccine. I will write it down if you want over here. Okay, virus is used as a vector over here. And what is plant-based vaccine? So plant-based vaccines are vaccines in which a vector is used. The gene will be inserted into the vector. The recombinant DNA which is produced, that will be inserted into the plant genome. Do you remember Agrobacterium tumefaciens? So similarly, you take the recombinant DNA, you insert it into the plant, and the plant will produce that protein from the gene, and then that part of the plant can be eaten, and that means that that vaccine has come from the plant. So that is plant-based vaccine. I hope this is clear. So I will write it down over here. Recombinant DNA is inserted into plant genome. So I hope this is clear. Okay, so these are the three types of vaccines which are produced using recombinant DNA technology. See, the method of recombinant DNA technology is the same. You take the required gene, you insert it into a vector, you get recombinant DNA molecule, you insert it into the host. The host will produce proteins from that gene which you have inserted, and that protein will be the product which you want. Simple. And that you can remove by downstream process. So these are the three types of recombinant DNA vaccines. Now please remember, these vaccines are very important because you can also use them to treat non-communicable diseases. Okay, I will write down the word over here, non-communicable diseases. What is the meaning of a non-communicable disease? A disease which cannot spread from one person to another. For example, cancer. So right now trials have been going on to produce a vaccine against cancer, and in some period of years or in some time frame, this vaccine is definitely going to come out, and it will be helpful in basically preventing cancer. So please remember, these recombinant DNA vaccines are very, very important. Okay, so I hope this part is clear, and these vaccines are important in eradicating diseases. Is this clear? So that is about how vaccines are produced using recombinant DNA technology, and we have also studied in general about what vaccines are. Now under vaccines, we have to study another part which is called as oral vaccines. Now this healthcare application part is a very, very big part. It is mostly theoretical. Okay, so the next is going to be something which is called as oral vaccines. What is the meaning of an oral vaccine? Oral vaccines are the vaccines which you don't have to inject. So they are in the form of a liquid or a tablet which you have to just swallow, and they will enter through your digestive system. So basically here what is happening is that vaccine is what? Vaccine is that protein which is causing the disease. That protein has become weak, you have made it weak and you are swallowing it. So these are those vaccines which are prepared for microorganisms whose proteins can be ingested, whose proteins can be taken in through the digestive system, and your body will produce antibodies against it. There are many there are many advantages of using oral vaccines compared to injectable vaccine. First of all, ease of administration. See, if you are trying to give an injection to a child, then obviously that child will be very reluctant. However, if you give it in the form of a liquid or tablet, it is much more easier to give. Second is cost of production. These oral vaccines are much more cheaper compared to injectable vaccines. Okay, and third is storage. Storage is also much more easier compared to the injectable vaccines. Okay, so these are the three advantages of oral vaccines. Oral vaccines means which you take orally, which you swallow them or you drink them. Is this clear? Now oral vaccines, how are they prepared? Again the same thing, please remember. Okay, so again that sequence I am going to write down. Okay, so I have the pathogen or I have the microorganism, so I will write down over here disease causing microorganism. I have this pathogen, and from this pathogen I will remove the toxic protein. Okay, that toxic protein I will get the gene which is responsible for the production of that protein. Okay, and obviously this gene will be modified so that the protein which is produced from that gene, that will be less toxic. Please remember, the gene which is used, you cannot use the original gene, because if you use the original gene, then the host will produce the original protein, and that original protein will be harmful for the body. So you alter that gene so that the protein will be the same but it will be less harmful. So that gene is modified, then that gene is, it is what? It is inserted into a vector, and what will you get? You will get something which is called as recombinant DNA molecule. This recombinant DNA molecule will be then inserted into a host. Now please remember, in the case of oral vaccines, mostly the hosts which are used, okay, these hosts are basically plants. So inside the plant genome, okay, the recombinant DNA is inserted, and inside the plants what is going to happen is that gene will get attached to the genome of the plant, and using protein synthesis the gene will be used to produce that desired protein, and that desired protein is the same protein which is present in the virus or the bacterium, but it is less toxic, that protein. Now what happens is that plant which has got those proteins, that plant is then edible. Are you getting what is the meaning of edible? Edible means you can eat it. So if suppose you take that part of the plant where that protein is produced, by introducing the recombinant DNA technology, you take that plant, you eat it. When you eat it, that protein enters your digestive system. When it enters your system, your body recognizes it as a foreign material. It produces antibodies. So the antibodies are ready. When the actual virus enters at any time, your antibodies are already ready to combat it or fight it. Is this clear? So these are called as oral vaccines. They are also called as edible vaccines. These are the steps. Okay. So please remember, these are the same steps which we use in production of recombinant DNA vaccines. Is this clear? Okay. So these are also called as, I will write down over here, edible vaccines. For example, if you remember, polio vaccine is an edible vaccine. The polio drops are kept in the mouth, and then obviously they will mix with your saliva and they will enter your bloodstream when it goes into the digestive system. Okay. Now under oral vaccines, something new which has come up. Okay. Those vaccines which have been formed, they have been called as melt in your mouth vaccines. Okay, these are the new type of vaccines which have been formed, which are called as melt in your mouth vaccines. Now these are basically like lozenges or tablets, okay, which you keep under your tongue, and that will melt quickly and it will dissolve in the saliva, and then obviously when you swallow it, it will go into your digestive system, directly go into the blood and deliver the vaccine. These are called melt in your mouth vaccines. You don't even have to swallow it. Okay, it is like those mouth freshener strips which are present, which you have to put beneath your tongue, and they will just disappear, they will just dissolve. So same type of strips are present, and they are called melt in your mouth vaccines, which you don't even need to swallow like a tablet or a liquid. It will just quickly get absorbed beneath your tongue into the saliva, and it will deliver into the bloodstream. I hope this is clear. Okay, best example of this is Bacillus vaccine, which is used to treat influenza, which is also called as flu. So now what is this Bacillus vaccine? I'm just giving you extra information. So basically the same methodology is used. Whatever disease is there, whatever virus or bacterium or pathogen is causing that disease, you remove the protein, you modify that protein, you find out the gene responsible for creating that protein, that gene you insert it into a cloning vector, you get recombinant DNA. Recombinant DNA, now it is inserted into a bacteria called as Bacillus. Now inside the Bacillus, obviously the gene will multiply, the vector will multiply, and that gene will be converted into the desired protein. So now that protein will be present into the Bacillus bacterium, which is the host. Now what happens is, this bacterium, from that we do not remove the protein, we take that bacteria and we dry it out. Okay, so that is called as Bacillus spores, please remember. So these dried bacteria, obviously that bacteria, when you keep it in your mouth, it is not going to cause disease. Okay, so it is a non-harmful bacteria. Those dried bacterial spores, they are then added into some sort of a substance, and that when you keep it under your mouth, those spores dissolve in your saliva and they directly enter your bloodstream. Is this clear? So Bacillus vaccine is one of the vaccines which is for influenza, which is also called as flu. Okay, and that is a melt in your mouth vaccines. These are the most recent ones. They are even better than oral vaccines, where you don't need to swallow that vaccine, or you don't need to drink that vaccine. It will just completely disintegrate, it will dissolve in your saliva, you won't even know that you had put it in your mouth. So that is called as melt in your mouth vaccines. So with that, we have completed this entire first application of biotechnology, which is healthcare biotechnology. Once again, under healthcare biotechnology, first of all we studied in which fields it is used. So organ transplant, DNA fingerprinting, stem cell preparation, forensic medicine, okay, vaccine production, insulin production. Then insulin production, please remember, okay, Hakura and Gilbert, two very important people. Hakura discovered the sequence of insulin gene, he put it in PBR322. Obviously Gilbert did that. Beside beta galactosidase gene, this was inserted into cloning vector E. coli, host E. coli. E. coli produced pre-proinsulin, which is inactive insulin, which when enters the human body, it becomes active. To remove the pre-proinsulin, trypsin is used, that is called as trypsin treatment. Another byproduct was penicillinase, which gives that bacteria protection against penicillin. Is that clear? That was about insulin. You have to know insulin is produced by beta cells of islets of Langerhans present in the pancreas. Next is vaccine production. In that, first of all, we learned what is a vaccine. It gives you active acquired immunity. Active means your body produces your own antibodies, and acquired means it is not present from birth. Okay, so that is given. Then how is a vaccine made? It is basically an organism which has become weak or which is made weak, and it is then inserted into the body, or you just take the toxic protein or the antigen, you make it weak and you insert it into the body. That is what a vaccine is. Then we studied what are recombinant DNA vaccines, three types: naked DNA, right? Second is what? Do you remember? First is naked DNA, second is viral vector, third is plant-based vaccines. Then the next thing we studied about oral vaccines, and now we have studied melt in your mouth vaccine. So that ends our part of healthcare biotechnology. We have to still study agriculture, applications in agriculture, so that is not going to be a big part. So now we are starting with the second application of biotechnology, and that is called as application in agriculture. Now how does biotechnology help in agriculture? You already know about Agrobacterium tumefaciens. Okay, Agrobacterium tumefaciens is basically a bacterium which is used to transfer the TI plasmid into the plant, and inside the TI plasmid you can add the gene of your interest, and that gene will produce the required protein. So using recombinant DNA technology, you can basically produce disease resistant plants. I will write it down over here. Okay, then you can produce pest resistant plants, for example BT crops. Okay, I will write it down over here, I will explain it to you. BT crops which are produced. Okay, you can produce crops having high productivity. Okay, so all these things you can do by using recombinant DNA technology in agriculture. Now what is the methodology? Very simple. You take the desired gene, you insert it into a vector, you get the recombinant DNA molecule. That recombinant DNA molecule you insert into a host, it may be agrobacterium. You allow the agrobacterium or suitable host to infect the plant, so that recombinant DNA will enter the plant. Inside the plant genome, the gene will be undergoing transcription, translation, and producing the protein. Now if you are producing disease resistant plants, that means that protein will protect that plant from a particular disease. It is like a vaccine for the plant. If you are producing pest resistant plants, for example BT crops, so I am going to show you this example over here. Now what is BT? BT stands for a bacterium which is called as Bacillus thuringiensis. This is the name of a bacterium, very important bacterium, just like E. coli. Bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis. Now what happens naturally, I will tell you. Insects which are pests, okay, insects which eat away the plants, these insects, if they accidentally eat this bacteria which is Bacillus thuringiensis, then this bacterium basically has a toxic protein. Okay, and this toxic protein, when it enters the digestive system of the insects, it causes poisoning and it causes the insect to die. Now I am going to just show you. Now this you don't have in your book, this is just for extra information, okay, and also for people who are giving entrance exams it may be important. So I am showing this diagram of Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a bacterium. Okay, as always I will show this nucleoid which is in yellow color, and what else I am going to show? I am going to show the plasmid. So this is the plasmid which is naturally present in Bacillus thuringiensis, and in this plasmid I am going to show this gene. Okay, this gene is called as the cry gene, CRY, cry. Okay, now what happens is, when this bacterium is accidentally, suppose if an insect is eating the leaf of a plant and on that leaf this bacterium is present, so this bacterium will enter inside the digestive system of the insect. Now what happens is, inside the digestive system, now the digestive system of insects, it is alkaline, it is not acidic, it is basic or alkaline, and in that basic or alkaline pH conditions, this cry gene, okay, now this cry gene, what it does is, everybody knows this cry gene will undergo protein synthesis and it will produce a toxic protein. So this Bacillus thuringiensis, it produces a toxic protein. Now this toxic protein, it is naturally inactive, but when it enters the digestive system of the insects, when it is surrounded by basic pH, this inactive protein, it basically becomes active. Are you getting this? This will become active when the insects swallow that Bacillus thuringiensis, because it requires a base to become active. So when this toxic protein becomes active, it causes poison, it causes destruction of the digestive system of the insects and the insects die. So Bacillus thuringiensis is used as a pesticide. Now, if I want to prepare a plant which is having that same gene, same protein, how will I do? Very simple. I will take this Bacillus thuringiensis, I will use restriction enzyme to cut that cry gene. That cry gene, now I will insert into a TI plasmid. I will remove the tDNA from TI plasmid agrobacterium. Then in that TI plasmid, I will insert the cry gene from Bacillus, recombinant DNA. Again, I will insert it into agrobacterium. I will allow that plant to be infected. When that plant gets infected, recombinant DNA will be released inside the genome. Cry gene will go, and that plant only will produce that toxic protein. Plant will not be harmed by that toxic protein. Please remember, when that insect feeds on that leaf, that protein will be present in all the parts of the plant. That protein will go inside the body of the insect, and because of alkaline conditions, that protein will become active, it will die. So these crops are called as BT crops. So you are getting BT cotton, BT brinjal. However, there is controversy because people think, what if these toxic proteins harm our body? So if we are eating brinjal, which is BT brinjal is a genetically modified crop prepared using Bacillus thuringiensis, same thing which I am explaining, or BT cotton. So there is that controversy, what if these harmful proteins affect us? They are killing insects, but what if they affect us? So that is why there is that controversy. So you can prepare crops using biotechnology by inserting that particular gene. Suppose if there is a gene which increases the size of the fruits or vegetables, that gene you take, insert it into the vector, you will get recombinant DNA, again recombinant DNA with a host, you put it inside the plant, that gene will undergo protein synthesis, it will produce the protein, and the fruits and vegetables will be bigger. Very simple. So basically you can improve the productivity of agriculture by using recombinant DNA technology. I hope this is clear. Okay, the methodology is going to be the same which we use in recombinant DNA technology. Three things. Okay, we need the required gene, we need a cloning vector, and we require a competent host, and then the same thing. So this is the first thing in application of biotechnology in agriculture. Second thing which we have to study is about something which is called as micro propagation. Okay, I will write this again. Okay, something else is called as micro propagation. Okay, so what is the meaning of micro propagation? The meaning of micro propagation is propagation or cultivation of large number of crops in a very short time. So you are basically producing many crops in one go, but you are doing it in a very short time. That is called as micro propagation. Okay, I will write it down if you want. Propagating or cultivation of large number of plants in a very short time or in a very short duration. This is called as micro propagation. Now how this micro propagation is done? It is done by using a technique which is called as tissue culture. Tissue culture I have explained in one of the plant hormone lectures. Okay, so what is tissue culture? Very simple. I will again tell you what is tissue culture. So you take a plant, okay, from the plant you remove a cell, whichever cell you want, root cell, stem cell, leaf cell. That cell is called as the explant, and what you will do is that cell you will grow under suitable conditions. So just imagine this is a Petri plate which we take, and in this Petri plate I will add nutrient medium. Nutrient medium is the medium in which that cell will grow. So I am labeling it as nutrient medium, and in that nutrient medium I am going to insert the explant. Now what will happen? That cell will keep on growing, it will become multicellular, it will form organs. Okay, so that is called organogenesis. And finally an entire plant will be formed artificially in the laboratory, that is called tissue culture technique. In the same way you can produce organs, you can even use it in animal tissue culture. So tissue culture is a method by which you can produce many plants simultaneously using instruments and in a very short duration, that is called as micropropagation. Okay, again in tissue culture it is very easy. You can insert a desired gene into the cell depending on what type of plant you want to create. So micropropagation also plays a very important part, and that is also using recombinant DNA technology. Are you getting this over here? I will write down this later on. This step will give rise to something which is called organogenesis. Okay, organogenesis means that these cells will keep on dividing and they will form a tissue. So let me draw it over here. This is your Petri plate, right? And inside this Petri plate, now I have got many cells which I have formed. They have just divided. Okay, and obviously the nutrient medium is present, and this is called as organogenesis, and later on this will give rise to an entire organ. Okay, and that can again later on give rise to a plant. So this is called tissue culture technique. So over here also you can insert the desired gene, again the same steps. So micropropagation is the second thing, how biotechnology can be used or how it can be applied in agriculture. Now micropropagation is very important because it is useful in plants which have recalcitrant seeds. If you want, I will write down over here recalcitrant. What is the meaning of recalcitrant seeds? So normally if you remember, there are some things which are called as seed banks. Seed banks are the areas where seeds of different plants are preserved in very low conditions, that is low temperatures. They are called cryopreservation techniques, minus 196 degrees Celsius. So that seeds can be preserved for number of years and you can use them whenever you want. Correct? This is to prevent basically extinction of the species of that plant. But there are certain plants which produce recalcitrant seeds. What are recalcitrant seeds? Recalcitrant seeds are the seeds which, suppose if you freeze at such a low temperature, then because at such a low temperature obviously the conditions are very dry, the moisture contained in the seed decreases a lot. And if the moisture contained in the seed, if it decreases below a certain point, then the seed dies, it becomes useless. So these seeds you cannot preserve at a very low temperature because their moisture reduces a lot, and then when that moisture becomes so less, you cannot even use it as a seed even if you preserve it at that temperature. So these seeds cannot be preserved. So the only way to grow these plants is by using micropropagation. You have to quickly take one cell from the plant and grow it. You cannot preserve the seeds of these plants. So micropropagation is a very important technique for plants having recalcitrant seeds. Recalcitrant means these seeds have already lower moisture content. If you keep it in an environment having extremely low temperature, then they will become dry and they will not be viable. You will not be able to use them later. The other seeds, they have a lot of moisture. Even if you keep it at such low temperatures, they can still have certain amount of moisture left. So you can use them again to grow a plant. But recalcitrant seeds you cannot preserve at low temperatures. That is why you can use this method of micropropagation for their growth. Okay, also over here in the book a word has been used which is called as germplasm. What is the meaning of germplasm? See, germplasm is any biological material which can be used to grow a plant or animal from it. For example, seed can be called as a germplasm because you can grow an entire plant from it. Gametes can be called as germplasm because male and female gamete, if you fertilize or unite, you can form a zygote which can give rise to an individual. So any biological substance which can give rise to a new organism and which is having all the genomic data inside it, that is called as a germplasm. So seeds are called as germplasm, gametes are called as germplasm. So with that we finish with this second application of biotechnology in agriculture. First, we studied about how we can produce disease-resistant plants, pest-resistant plants, plants with high productivity using recombinant DNA technology and by inserting the required gene in the plant. Second, we studied how micropropagation can be used. What is micropropagation? Growing large number of plants in a very short duration. That method uses tissue culture. Again, in tissue culture, I have explained that you take a cell from the plant, explant, you grow it in a nutrient medium artificially under laboratory conditions. That cell will divide. So organogenesis will happen, organ will be formed. Then if you want that organ, you can remove it or you can continue that organ. So you can keep on growing that organ so it develops into a plant. So those plants are called as products of tissue culture or micropropagation. How is it useful? It is useful in cases of plants which have recalcitrant seeds. That means those seeds cannot be stored at low temperature. So these are the two applications in agriculture. So with that, we have finished with our first two applications of biotechnology, that is healthcare biotechnology and agriculture. In our next lecture, we are going to start with gene therapy, and then if we have time, we are going to start with genetically modified organisms. So if you like this lecture, please put in a like, do leave a comment, subscribe to my channel if you haven't, press the bell icon, and also share this video with your friends. Thanks a lot.